It was a miserable day in Elidor's ministry of treason. The news spread quickly. A duck had defected. Indeed, the duck was none other than Darcy III, son of the well-respected Duke of Quack. Darcy achieved what he wanted. He became a fish. Indeed, he would come to be known as one of the founding fathers of the duck-fish paradox. But just as every cloud has a silver lining, so does every rose have its thorn. Darcy committed an offence, but it was now his family who'd have to pay the price. You see, being a fish, he was no longer affected by the law of the ducks, so the punishment was transferred to his next of kin. What Darcy had done was just outright irresponsible. His father was now facing charges of degradation and treason, and would be eaten alive if he didn't think of something quickly. So he began to think, and think, and think. And then he knew. The answer was in front of him all along. Darcy had been in exactly the same position before his father, so the old duck did just the same as his son. He became a fish. But now the next ancestor down the line was facing the punishment. Darcy's own mother, the duck who laid his egg, was in danger of being executed. But she remembered her son and how his father took his example, and she did exactly the same thing. She too became a fish. And so on and so forth. No matter how many times the punishment was placed on Darcy's increasingly distant ancestors, they all did the same thing. But as we know, every creature is related, so eventually every duck in Elidor had been threatened with execution and evaded it by becoming a fish. Now the only ducks left in Elidor were the chief duck and a few ministers. And so the chief duck began to wonder, was this all even worth it? All he'd achieved was mutiny and outrage. And in fact, he himself was beginning to wonder that maybe fish aren't so bad after all. You see, he'd been observing the fish, wondering what exactly Darcy found so interesting in them. And although he didn't find the answer, he did notice something else. One of the fish caught his eye. He'd never seen a creature so beautiful in his life. He'd spent days and nights wishing he was with his newfound love. And his heart was torn between his devotion to the kingdom of ducks and his love and fascination with the fish. What he did know is that he had a duty. As far as he knew, he and the remaining government officials were the only ducks left on Earth. He couldn't let the whole species go extinct. It would have been easy for him to become a fish and to live happily ever after in the lake, but he was made of stronger material. He decided to remain a duck and to try to approach his beloved fish. Maybe she'd like him the way he was. So one night the chief duck went out into the lake and dived down. He spent ages looking, but eventually he found the fish that he liked. Swimming past the school of fish, many of which were former ducks, he approached this wonderful creature. Somehow she knew that he didn't mean to harm her. All at once she felt a connection. They swam away to the other corner of the lake and spent many hours gazing into each other's eyes. One thing led to another. They started moving closer and closer, and need I continue? There was something sublime in this union, a unification of predator and prey, lustful, yet so pure. Several weeks passed. The chief duck was worried. He'd acted on his feelings rather than his thoughts. What would the offspring be like? But soon his worries were dispersed. In fact, it was even better than he imagined. The eggs that the fish laid had hatched, and you wouldn't believe it. Half of the children were baby fish, half the children were ducklings. And thus the ducks and fish lived in harmony. Upon reaching adulthood, a duck could choose whether it wants to remain a duck or become a fish. Cack, the doctor who'd performed these operations, was no longer a criminal. He was now the national consultant for transitional surgery. The go-to guy if you wanted to be a fish. Darcy's name was printed upon all the major landmarks in Elador, and the chief duck, previously feared, was now loved as a father figure. That's not to say that everything was perfect. There were some issues, minor logistical ones, but how they were solved sounds like a story for another day on the Duck and Fish Show.